r/AskReddit. Do bosses like Michael Scott actually exist? And if you work, or worked for one, what's your craziest story? Worked with a genuine Michael Scott, that is. A nice, well-meaning person who just did some absurd things. We had kidnapping drills one day where we learned how to not be kidnapped. Notably, this was a regular, boring office in a regular, boring suburb. No reason why kidnapping would be on anybody's radar. Also, he and several of the guys randomly broke out into a push-up contest. Again. White-collar office. Middle-aged dudes in khakis. He couldn't remember the nationality of our Hispanic colleague. Tried to learn Spanish to make her feel special when she returned from maternity leave. First, what he learned was not Spanish, and second, she was from Portugal. She knew like 5 words of Spanish. Once he disappeared for 4 days. No call. No email. Wouldn't respond to any of our attempts to reach him. Finally, someone drove out to his house to make sure he was alive. He was. He'd just forgotten to tell us he was taking the week off and then lost his phone in a lake. There were many moments like these. Great boss. Genuinely cared about everyone in the company. Occasional moments of brilliance where he really got things done. But OMG, so many moments of ridiculousness. Kidnapping drills, did he tell you to not ever to go to a second location? No. We learned to hold on to our desks and scream fire. Great plan if an unarmed kidnapper comes into our suburban office while we are at our desks. Probably not going to work so well if there isn't a desk to hang on to. Or if he's armed. Or if we are alone. But if that unarmed kidnapper comes in during the middle of the workday, we should all be set. I used Michael Scott as a reference point for an old boss of mine from the moment I started working there. He made Chewbacca noises on the regular, because one of my coworkers' names sort of vaguely sounded like Chewbacca. It didn't. Used voice to text extremely loudly in his office for no reason. To send really personal messages. Got really excited, and wore a specific vest anytime we had after work outings scheduled. Shouted the same like 7 references to old movies and extremely awkward hip hop song quotes 100 times a day, and insisted on greeting all our international coworkers very loudly in their language. They all speak perfect English, of course, looking around for approval afterward, and then fully giggling at everyone's French accents on conference calls. He also told me a lot about an improv show he did for a full year after it happened. That said, he had all the good parts too. He never hesitated, go to the mat for any of us, whether we deserved it or not. He gave really sage business advice and great examples of how to face challenges out of absolutely nowhere, and he came to every community play I did in the 4 years I worked for him and told everyone else in the office how good I was in it for the following month and chastised them for not coming. When things really got serious or bad in my life, he couldn't have been more kind, helpful, and supportive. Honestly? Probably the best boss I'll ever have. That's the most Scott-like boss I've seen yet. That thing about the voice to text is hilarious. Please reminds, son, he has appointment for acne issue tomorrow at 1 o'clock period. He needs to be ready at noon period. We had an anonymous feedback program at work, and our boss was livid with the results. Particularly with several comments that he frequently lost his temper in meetings and would yell at us. The more he talked about how incorrect and unfair and hurtful these comments were, the redder and angrier he got, until he finally pounded the table and shouted, "I do not scream in meetings. Okay. Guess what? I have flaws. What are they? Oh, I don't know. I sing in the shower. Sometimes I spend too much time volunteering. Occasionally I'll hit somebody with my car. So sue me." No, don't sue me. That is the opposite of the point that I'm trying to make. I had one, and these are just a few quick stories. He asked me how much I weighed during my interview. One time he was considering selling the company to a Japanese company, and while walking them around the building he was heard saying, "We really bummed the hell out of you, huh?" He got on the intercom and interrupted everyone by yelling for someone to bring him the football team schedule. I have video of him telling a really cringy joke during a sales meeting. You could see at least one person covering their face in embarrassment. One time he told me to call his assistant and have her bring him a bag of coffee and his 5-pound dumbbell. He had a secret facelift. He was mysteriously gone for 3 weeks and came back with a beard. I ended up with a box of pictures from the 70s with an exotic dancer giving him a lap dance. In the conference room. Same furniture. One time I watched his business partner go down the potluck line, tasting everything with the same fork. At the end of the line, he stuck his used fork into the cake. I haven't eaten at a work buffet since. Honestly, these are just the ones I immediately remember. It was 5 years of this. The second one is it basically killed me. They did not, in fact, buy the company. The second one killed a lot of people, to be fair. He wanted a pomegranate for lunch and they were out of season, but that didn't stop him from sending me on a quest to every grocery store in town in search of a pomegranate. Multiple produce guys laughed at me, but that was the easiest $13 per hour I've ever made. Edit, I'll say it here, no, I did not find a pomegranate, and when I came back he was eating Subway and he seemed to have forgot he'd even sent me. Maybe I could have gone home, or to the movies etc, but I don't know. Driving around leisurely listening to the radio seemed like a pretty good alternative to doing my actual work at the time. I did in fact check the gas station in Carbondale. They also do not carry pomegranates, unless they are in season. Shoulder just called around and went to lunch, then come back hours later saying you had driven to those locations to check. That's using time well. This is a paradox. He held a meeting with our whole team less one person to discuss, said person being gay. We all knew for well over a year and never made a deal of it. So yes, they are out there, and that is why the show is so funny to me. I can relate. Did he try to kiss him? No. The guy was on vacation, so our staff meeting was strategically moved when he was out of office. I worked for a woman as her personal assistant / cat sitter. She was super rich and off the deep end nuts. She had me order a mannequin online and then paid me to take one of the mannequin legs to Nordstrom to try and see what suitcase I could buy that would fit the dismembered mannequin body, because she wanted to fly with the mannequin to Pittsburgh to display as her daughter, dressed in her daughter's clothes, at that daughter's graduation celebration. Buying the mannequin was a whole thing too. She kept trying to get me to order from adult doll websites because she didn't get it. LMAO. I have a feeling you might have been an accessory to a murder / dismemberment and not even realize it. Or she went the long way around ordering her own sex doll. Wow, this is less Michael Scott and more clinically insane. I want to hear more. I had a boss once who spent all morning locked in his office. He asked me to come in after lunch where he showed me a handmade graph. He then proceeded to explain that this was a chart of all the sex he had ever had in his life. See, here it is blank, until I joined the army. Then I went to a hooker here. Then they sent me to Vietnam where hookers only charged $2 per time. That's where you see the big jump. I was on 2 tours, but then got shot in the face. I came back home, and you see how it just drops to almost nothing. I was astounded. Was it actually true? If so, I'm real curious how he survived getting shot in the face. I once responded to a call where a guy was shot during a mugging. Bullet went through his mouth, in the left cheek, and out the right one. Did it smash his teeth up? Almost certainly. I had a boss that used to watch me through a gap in the glass partition between our desks. She wanted to see if I was paying attention during meetings. One day, I put a large folder to cover the gap and she freaked. I still laugh when I think about it. This sounds way more like Dwight but still hilarious. The day Dwight became manager. My boss used to carry around a backpack full of hammers, and if you fell asleep at your desk he started banging a hammer on your desk until you woke up, and then he would autograph the hammer and give it to you as a gift. To be fair to your boss, is falling asleep at work common? I'd do it once for a free hammer. My ass boss insisted his daughters be flower girls in my wedding. I declined. At the reception, he told me I was spending too much time talking to one person, and I need to work the room more. Why was he at your wedding? Probably because it's less of a headache to invite him and hope he behaves himself than to exclude him and have to deal with the fallout at work for weeks/months/years. My boss is certainly Michael Scott-esque. When I first started I was essentially Pam as well, since I was both receptionist and his assistant to some extent. My favorite story was back when we were prepping for a conference. Some context, he's terrible with the English language in general and will mangle phrases and descriptions to no end. How the turntables. So on a group call he kept talking about wanting a golden hamster ball to do giveaways with. Was raving about how great it would be spinning around while people walked by, all the while everyone on the call was just sitting in confused silence. However, by that point, I had become so good at decoding his nonsense that I knew he was referring to a gold raffle cage and sent him a message privately asking if it's what he was thinking. To this day he still talks about the fact I can read his mind and must be psychic. And he still refers to it as a hamster ball. All in all, he's a pretty nice guy and a solid boss. Hired me based on a gut feeling and has been decent to me ever since. I think I knew it would be a good fit when during the interview he tried to tell me about the 4 pillars of the company and forgot one. Told me later it was knowledge. And I'll give you the 4th pillar. After lunch. Had a manager at my previous job that really tried his best to be everyone's BFF. He loved giving pep talks and thought he could raise our abysmal morale by being Mr. Positivity. Note, morale was low because we were always buried in work and paid shit. He'd crack jokes, randomly burst into song and sneak up behind you to yell you're doing a great job. Unfortunately, he was also super incompetent at his job. He relied heavily on a junior colleague for help with technical stuff. They practically did his whole job for him and spent days working on paperwork that should really only take an hour or 2. If you had a problem, his answer was usually either to stare blankly at you until you left or to say, think positive and it'll work itself out. Thing he did I hated the most, whenever people would apply to work at the company, he'd print out the stack of resumes, sit at his desk and read aloud all of the parts he found funny. He'd laugh at people for working at McDonald's or other fast food places. He loved finding grammar mistakes and making fun of them. If someone had a cringe-worthy objective statement, he'd guffaw over that too. This was all done loudly, and it was a open office, so you couldn't avoid hearing it. That definitely lowered morale too. Making fun of people he's never met. Mr. Positivity sounds like a real bitch. I once read a resume intended for my boss. It looked ridiculous. 50% of it was about how the guy liked to exercise, but in a really monotonous and repeating way. Well, the guy got the job, and he turned out to be the best colleague I've ever had. Excellent dry humor, good at poking fun at any situation, while maintaining positivity and working efficiency. He was simply bad at writing. Resumes don't mean shit. My brother had 2 bosses at his first job that I think fit this. It was an old married couple that owned the gym across the street from us. Probably in their 70s when he started working there. The wife was from Germany and super strict. The husband was clearly losing it. Some notable mentions are when the husband combined bleach and ammonia to clean the hot tub and sauna room, tear gassing my brother in the process. Wife insisted the street be swept once a week. This was my brother's task. Almost every single time, the husband would come out halfway through with a leaf blower and destroy any progress my brother had made. Also, husband would regularly sit in the sauna for way too long and have to be rescued by brother and coworkers. Brother opened every Saturday. They never gave him a key, so he would have to hop the fence to get in. Husband would regularly sit in the sauna for way too long and have to be rescued by brother and coworkers. That's actually kinda sad, like he probably had some mental health issues or early stage dementia. Not tear gas. Chlorine gas. He could have killed your brother. I had a redhead boss who made us all sit down and watch a training video about how we shouldn't refer to him as a ginger because it is bullying. No one had ever called him that. The boss I had in this company wasn't like Michael Scott. He looked a lot like Homer Simpson, though. But the company itself was like Dunder Mifflin. I watched The Office right before working in this company and thought, no way this happens in the real world, because so far I had worked in very professional places. But then these things happened. General manager had a daughter who was a drug addict, and so he hired her. It was company policy not to hire relatives. No, it wasn't his company. Said daughter liked to fool around with the truck drivers who stayed overnight to depart in the early morning. Fell in love with one who was married. He said he would leave his wife for her. Wife got pregnant. Daughter showed up to work drunk and trashed the office. A sales employee accused the HR manager of having an affair with the general manager. Yells were yelled. A woman once called and told me to connect her with the general manager. I asked her name and she said, "I'm his lover. He will know." Thereafter the general manager called me to clarify that woman was not his lover. Daughter of the general manager liked to flirt with the sales representatives. But she was married. So she started flirting with them saying it was me. Using the company phone we shared. When I found out, I took the phone and showed it to my manager. He downplayed the whole thing. The messages were really explicit. This same girl got pregnant from one of the production bosses, 35 years her senior. He was married with 4 children. She was married with 2 children. They now live together with all their children plus 1. 2 workers were working on a ladder without helmets or any protection. One almost fell, the other one saved him but fell himself. Didn't die, but ended up with bad neurological damage. He fell head first. The one who had been saved hanged himself in the company 2 months later, out of guilt. Then the company bought helmets. The father of the young man who hanged himself continued working exactly at the place where he found his son hanging. A marketing worker once told me, right in front of the HR manager, that he would hop through my house's window at night and rape me. The HR manager giggled and said, "Don't let him catch you." I once was violently yelled at for the disappearance of a check I hadn't even touched. Said check was found at the bottom of the general manager's daughter's desk drawer. Expired. An elder man who was in negotiations with the marketing manager kept insisting in taking me to his beach house. When I complained to such manager about how inappropriate this was, he laughed and said, "That man can't even get it up." I could go on, really? But you get the idea. I just remembered one that was hilarious. This company produced and sold GMO corn. There were too many corn sacks, so the company had a deposit somewhere in a field, about 15 miles from the office. When the annual fiscal audit came, my boss was worried he would have to take the auditors there. I asked, "Is it because your tax declaration is not accurate?" "No, it's just it's infested with huge rats." "Why don't you take a few cats to get rid of them?" We did. The rats killed the cat. I later told one of the engineers, "The rat situation can't be that bad, can it?" And he laughed and walked away laughing. Jesus, that was a wild ride from start to finish. And that though I only worked there for 5 months.